Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I'm here with my good buddy, colleague, and friend, A1, Mr. Brian E. Roach, as we approach the first podcast of the off-season. Brian, what you doing over there, my friend?
I'm trying to see into the future to figure out what's next for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've got my looking into the future light on.
Yeah,
trying to find it out.
You know what? I was looking to get one of those like headlamp. Those are very handy for working on just about anything.
4.
Oh, I have a ton of them, but they used to be a lot cheaper. Like I went on Amazon, I was going to get some of those as a gift, and they wanted like a small fortune for just like one of them, like 12 or 15 bucks. I'm like, are you serious? Like these are like they're like Dollar Tree
12
type
or
stuff.
15 bucks.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you.
12 or 15 bucks. These are like 90.
What's 90? What are you doing there? Construction work or
super
something?
lumens for hiking and being outside and crap like that.
I gotcha. Well, hey, Brian, it's a new year. People may see we're doing things a little bit differently. We're now into the 2025 edition of the podcast. So if you follow any of our playlists anywhere, especially on YouTube, it might be time to update those. We're updating and trying to do some things a little bit differently. You can see we got a little bit of a facelift here for those of you that are watching us either on YouTube or Spotify. We have 2 feeds for that, by the way. So some of you, if you only see the audio only feed on Spotify, go check us out on the video feed. Somehow we ended up with 2 of them. And we also want to remind all of you that the Steel City Underground podcast, it's brought to you by Week at the Beach. And Brian, we were talking about this off air. It's a pretty cool thing, but they had to move this back in the St. Pete in Clearwater area. It was supposed to happen during the actual Steelers bye week. It did not transpire because of the hurricane season that went through there. In Clearwater, they're building back. Some places impacted more than others. I mean, there's a bunch of Frenchies, a bunch of Krabbies, a bunch of Jimmies. Some of those places are back, some are not. I know the one Krabbies wasn't hit because it was like on the 2nd floor, but it's an area that is very near and dear to my heart. I also got some family and friends down that way too. So this one is set up in case anybody decides that they'd want to go to the Pro Bowl. Save your jokes for later. I understand it's still, you could go to Orlando. It's a hell of a lot warmer than what we're dealing with here. Single digits with this cold snap that's coming through. But it's time to trade the black and gold jersey for swimsuits and flip-flops at Tradewinds Resort in St. Pete, Florida. Join us January 31st through February 3rd for Bye Week at the Beach, where Steelers broadcasting legend Rob King will be live from the beach alongside some legends. Here's some names you haven't heard for a minute, Brian. Ernie Mills and Darren Perry will be there on hand as well. Yes, Ultimate Fan Weekend event will feature a meet and greet, a football skill competition, and a Pro Bowl watch party. Guests can book their stay at the Tradewinds now using the code BYWEEK, all one word, BYEWEEK. Enjoy the following perks and activities: 20% off your the best available rates, valid for those stays between January 29th and February 5th. A discounted rate is available before and after the event weekend as well. Swag bag upon check-in, discounts on some other things, and happy hour events, meet and greets, and the Pro Bowl watch party. So go check that out. Search for, I believe, the Tradewinds Resort or Bye Week at the Beach. Again, they moved this, so just wanted to let everybody know about this event. Again, use the code BYWEEK and you can save some money. In fact, it's actually buyweekatthebeach.com, and that'll take you to all of the relevant information.
Now, so since they moved it and it's now really in the off season, does that mean the bye week lasts until like July? and then it's like just a part. I mean, isn't that the way it is in Florida anyway? It's just a party constantly, and that's all. Wait, maybe that's just, I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? The funny thing is, I was in that area around this same time last year. The Royal Rumble was in St. Pete at the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium Tropicana Field. which was had the whole, it's not really a dome, it's almost like it has like a tarp over it. It's an older kind of dated stadium. People in that area, they're asking for a new one, for the Major League Baseball team. And
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, like the roof got like ripped off in the hurricane. So, but hey, it was nice to go down there and just walk around in shorts. You sure as hell ain't gonna do that anywhere around.
Like an event where a bunch of kings and queens like just roll
Oh
around.
geez, it's the WWE, man. I know that's not your thing. You don't like coffee. You're the weirdo. We do have some actual stuff to talk about as the NFL offseason begins here with us, with the Pittsburgh Steelers and around the most of the NFL. We see some of the coaching hires and stuff. We saw some of the surprises. What do you think, Brian? I mean, you got your conference championships. Was there a surprise? Washington Commanders.
Surprise?
I think it's a surprise.
Everybody didn't pick them. Everybody didn't pick Washington to upset the Lions.
No, of course,
and make like $1.50.
Yeah, you know what? What happened? You get a rookie quarterback, you get a retread head coach, and another retread is the offensive coordinator there in Washington. And like everyone predicted that this team was going to be, one step away from the Super Bowl, maybe in the Super Bowl. No, that's not how it works at all. In fact, as ridiculous as some of the folks out there, especially in some of the comments here, some of the comments on the website and our social media, everybody's in the Fire Tomlin camp, of course. I'm going to try and table most of that conversation, but I just want to bring up some statistics here. Do you know how ridiculous it might sound in this moment right now to say fire Dan Campbell? Would you do that if you're the Detroit Lions, or if you're a Detroit Lions fan? Are you saying fire Dan Campbell? Well, 5 seasons.
No.
5 seasons as a coach. 5 seasons as head coach. He's in the playoffs just twice, right? And he only has a win in 1 playoff. So he only has had 1 playoff win in 5 years, though. Isn't that what we're talking about with Mike Tomlin? Fire Dan Campbell too.
Well, no, you can't fire Dan Campbell.
But he
loves Dan Campbell.
All these winning seasons. How about Matt LaFleur? He has 1 win with the Green Bay Packers in the last 4 seasons.
I'd fire him. I don't like him.
That's pretty funny.
That guy.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. But you see what my point is, though, and he's not the only one. Kevin O'Connell, was he year 3 or 4? I got to look him up real quick too in his statistics. But that's the way everybody operates. That's the way everybody's in the fire now culture. We did not get the results that we wanted. Oh, but Joe, those guys, those coaches, Dan Campbell's winning. Matt LaFleur, they're winning. But that's the same thing we're saying about Tomlin, that all he does is produce winning seasons, but they're not winning seasons unless you win a Super Bowl. How about Jim Harbaugh? Jim Harbaugh has Lamar Jackson could be a 3-time MVP now, right? Imagine if he's the 3-time MVP and he's only won a playoff game in 1 or 2 of the seasons that he's been playing over the last 7 years, 8 years, whatever it is for Lamar Jackson right now. I'll look him up too. But I mean, just think about that. We said Harbaugh was on the hot seat. They finally got over that hump, 2 years ago, and finally won a playoff game with Lamar Jackson. But it had been a minute, and that seat was getting very hot. They didn't have winning seasons. You said this in the last show too. Ravens, they lost Jackson, and then they stunk. And then they were able to acquire some guys like Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum. They got some actual dudes on this roster, and we said that's what the Steelers might have to do. But by the way, Kevin O'Connell in 3 seasons, 2 appearances in the postseason with the Vikings, 0 playoff victories. But hey, he's the guru, and they won and everything like that. But I just like to point that out just for the sake of, I mean, we're all tired of it. People called us, and I quote, me and you, we are Tomlin ball lickers. I am not a Tomlin.
I read that.
I'm not a Tomlin ball licker. I mean, we pretty much said that we were pissed off and we're tired, and the Steelers got embarrassed. And there's going to have to be some changes, and people want those changes at the very top. Try and warn some of these folks, though, that could be disastrous. Yeah.
Between saying things like, Mike Tomlin is the greatest head coach on the face of the planet, and everything he does is wonderful, and he walks on water, and that, like that, I don't believe we do any of that, right? There's a difference between saying that and going, let's be realistic. We know the Rooneys aren't going to fire Mike Tomlin right now. Do I think he's a bad coach? No, I don't think he's a bad coach. Do I think that there's problems? Yes, I think there are problems. I mean, the article I wrote on SCU essentially says exactly this. No one should be immune, including Mike Tomlin. We just know that that's not going to be where the axe falls. But from my standpoint personally, I'm not into the ball licking thing. Maybe, like I said, maybe if it's a snowball and I'm thirsty and that's my liquid refreshment for the day, then I might lick the snowball, but that's about it.
Well, that sure beats anything you could say about peanut butter. So, man, if some people only knew some of the outtakes we have sometimes on the show. But what's next for the Steelers? Obviously, not firing Mike Tomlin. I guess we'll get a State of the Union or State of the whatever from Art Rooney II, and he'll talk about his displeasure and the promise that they had for this team this year. And they wanted to return to running the football and doing some other things, but they didn't meet all of those goals. And right now we're in the middle of all of this stuff where the Steelers and other teams, they got to make these decisions pretty quick, right? You got the Dallas Cowboys. They decided not to rehire Mike McCarthy. Some people are talking about, well, McCarthy did this, McCarthy did that. The difference between Mike McCarthy and Mike Tomlin is this. Mike McCarthy can't win if he doesn't have certain players on the field. When he doesn't have Micah Parsons, he can't win football games. When he doesn't have Dak Prescott, he can't win football games. When he didn't have Aaron Rodgers, he couldn't win football games. Mike Tomlin wins football games with Landry Jones, with Charlie Batch, with Byron Leftwich, with Michael Vick, with Duck Hodges, with Mason Rudolph, with Kenny Pickett, with Mitch Trubisky, and so on, and Justin Fields. I throw them in there too. I put out the shorts. Go look at them. They're on social media. They're on YouTube. The comparisons between Mitch Trubisky and his first, 40-some games, 50 games in the league versus that of Justin Fields, eerily similar, but so are their starts with their games with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I had to expand that a little bit. People were kind of trolling me, and they're like, Justin Fields appeared in 10 games. Well, I had to say he appeared in 10 games because Mitch Trubisky had like 4 games where he threw like 15, 20 passes minimum, maybe even more. But they weren't technically starts. He came in maybe in a backup role, but he ran for 4, and I didn't do his rushing touchdowns. Oh, whoop-de-doo. Fields ran for 5. Trubisky ran for 4. They were very similar. So I throw them in the same, you got to put it in the same kind of category that Fields is not a proven NFL quarterback. And even so, if you want to say Russ is washed up too, throw him in the list too. Tomlin won with him. Tomlin continues to get it done, even with a Ben Roethlisberger that had a bum elbow. That's the difference between him and someone like Mike McCarthy. But if the Steelers are going to do something, if it's Art Rooney, if it's Omar Khan, if it's Mike Tomlin, I don't know where the decision comes from or what those decisions are made, or if a decision's made about Mike Tomlin. Doesn't sound like it. Chicago Bears, maybe rumored other team speculating on a Tomlin trade, and they were told to go take a hike. Mike Tomlin even said, don't waste your time. He's under contract. Those decisions have to be made soon. As you see, like the Bears lining up for Ben Johnson, the Jets lining up for Aaron Glenn, and going after, trying to copycat and do whatever the rest of the league is doing.
There's not going to be any head coach changes in Pittsburgh. The head coach is going to be the head coach. That doesn't mean there's not going to be coaching changes. I think it's probably unlikely that Arthur Smith goes simply because he's only 1 year removed from being a head coach. And I don't know that he did enough to really warrant a ton of interest, even though he may get some looks. So I think Arthur Smith probably stays. But I do think Teryl Austin may have coordinated his last day of coordinating the coordination of the defense.
Well, he would be one of mine on the list to go, along with Pat Meyer, the offensive line. They could make some other changes.
Oh, God, yes.
I like Zach Cazzini as the wide receivers coach, but you see like what some other receivers are doing around the league. I don't know if that's quite 100% fixed. Does he get another year? Does he get a pass because of some of the talent? So what's next for the Steelers there? Obviously, acquiring talent, you'll have free agency in the draft, but just sticking on the side of the coaching thing for a second. And Mark Cabali said this actually in a tweet too, and he kind of nailed it. He was like, what's with the league? What's with the NFL and always just wanting to hire coordinators from whatever team just like had some wins? You know what I mean? Because we've seen it countless times again. Even like I know everyone wants to talk about Tomlin's tree or whatever, and it's like, yeah, who cares about that? Because right now, when you're rebuilding, you don't have like losing seasons, but you don't have the biggest winning seasons. Nobody's poaching your coaches, but at the same time, you have to improve and do stuff. Now, some people are sniffing around with Arthur Smith. I've seen it clickbaited. It was like, oh, Bears pass on Arthur Smith. Well, duh. I mean, they got to do a number of different candidates, and the Steelers have made him available for these interviews. And you see that happen around the league too, where, there's some obvious ones that pop up, just sad to say, for the Rooney Rule factor, but some of those guys do end up getting hired too. So I'm not going to say it's only for that reason, but you see it. And you see Smith, he's just meeting maybe a quota for the Bears so then they could go out after Ben Johnson, for example, off of the Lions, and within the division too, which was pretty crazy, I think. But if the Steelers move on from somebody like Teryl Austin, they're going to have to find somebody that was just released from somewhere else, or they have to promote from within. And that's what everybody hates. They're like, oh, well, you promote from within, that's terrible. Oh, they won't hire somebody else that will usurp power from Mike Tomlin. I'm like, that's so ridiculous. Mike Tomlin has brought in so many guys that have been coordinators or head coaches elsewhere over the years. Some with success, some without success. It's just kind of crazy when you look at it. Like I said, Bill Belichick, are you going to say that guys like Bill O'Brien or Romeo Crennel or none of those guys had any success? And even go back to Bill Cowher. Dom Capers didn't have the most success. These guys have losing records. Chan Gailey and Dick LeBeau had a very short stint as a head coach, and it just didn't work out. And for the most part, it doesn't. Even some of the recent guys from the Chiefs, they're not leaving there. Spagnuolo's not trying to leave from that. He's got a cushy job as defensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy tried to leave out of the shadow of Andy Reid. And everybody usually finds out the reason those Andy Reid teams do well is because of Andy Reid. And I think there's that same kind of label maybe with Mike Tomlin, although nobody's reaching to go try and get like a Matt Canada or Randy Fichtner when they go. But they tried to maintain the status quo. The biggest thing I have though is I saw this and people were, we mentioned Jim Harbaugh as part of this, but it was like Lamar Jackson can't get over the hump. Lamar Jackson, I don't think Lamar Jackson lost that game for the Ravens. If anything, they were in it because of Lamar Jackson, but he also had some turnovers. So, you can't throw picks and everything. At the same time, when people want to complain about Mike Tomlin, when does some of that fall on the quarterbacks that he had, namely Ben Roethlisberger for a period of that time with his turnovers and the interceptions and whatnot in some of those games? How does some of that fall on some of the players? So you got to you got to take on some of this. Where does it fall on the players? Where does it fall on the coaching? I think you're right, Brian. I think I look at the defensive coordinator. I also look at the offensive line, because even though they don't have maybe the talent that they expected to have there really hasn't been any kind of progression here in years. And in order for the quarterbacks to have even a modicum of success, you got to do something with the offensive line. And I think part of that is coaching. A big part of that's coaching.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that goes along with it, you just don't know what you have still with the offensive line. As we were talking earlier, Zach Frazier gets voted to the rookie team, which is great. And I think Zach had a great rookie season. And I think he was a consistent, highly performing center, right? But everything else everything is a question mark with the offensive line. They were not good at pass pro. They were not good at communicating with each other. And they had essentially a stable unit for the majority of the season, even though it wasn't the guys they initially anticipated having. I get it. Broderick Jones is playing out of position. Dan Moore has his ups and his downs. And McCormick wasn't the guy you really wanted in the position he was in. So, but you kind of expect, even under those circumstances, to see growth over the period of the season. And that you can attribute directly to coaching, and they did not get better as the season went on.
No, I didn't mean there was consistency, but is a 4th-round rookie going to do it? In some cases they can, and some they don't. I mean, you see, some of the coaching things. I go back to the Ravens, right? That Daniel Falele that weighs like 380 pounds. And we were talking about him in the pre-draft process. They bring him in, they make him a guard, and you can't move him around. That helps Roger Rosengarten, the rookie that's right next to him. Also helps TJ Watt being hurt, but and the way their offense is designed, that goes along with it. I think that's why some people were on against Arthur Smith, because a lot of the things that happen in the red zone, you didn't have the identity with running the football, the passing game. There were things that improved, and then there were things that didn't. There were things in certain situations that worked. This team struggled to gain a yard, 3rd and 1. 4th and 1. We saw it multiple times. It was almost like bewildering to watch Jaylen Warren not be able to get that yard against the Ravens and just to go down. And it was like he was sitting on top of the defense. He thought he was sitting on top of the defender, but his posterior went and his ass hit the ground. And you're like, well, he's down there. It's like you can't. It was just like you couldn't beg, borrow, or steal. But when we talk about some of the other moves that might need to be made, are there any other coaches on the staff? We kind of went over it before, but I tend to think, quarterbacks coach Tom Arth. Do we really know anything about him? No, we don't. We could speculate about Arthur Smith. Could he be one and done? It doesn't sound like he will unless he gets hired somewhere else. Who do the Steelers go out and grab? Will it be any better or worse than what they have right now? Kind of hard to envision being any worse. Year 2 of a coordinator is usually better. Mind you, if you have one of the same quarterbacks in place. We'll talk about that in a second too. Wide receivers coach, we kind of mentioned. Running backs coach, Eddie Faulkner. And you still have a consultant with Mike Sullivan who's got a lot of experience with quarterbacks, with offensive coordinators and stuff like that. They didn't want to put him in that position, but the Steelers ripped off a lot of points and 3 straight wins with Mason Rudolph at the end of the previous season to get into the postseason. So, I mean, some of that stuff I think I keep in place. Alfredo Roberts with the tight ends is the other one I didn't mention.
Yeah, I am not overly impressed with the tight end performance. I will say that, but I don't know that they're going to make a change at coach. I think the big question marks are really at the top of the offensive line tree and the defense as a whole, the coordinator position and the offensive line coach. Those are really 2 areas that you can just go and pinpoint and say that seem to be lacking leadership.
Yeah, and I think like the next thing you got to think about is the big gaping hole personnel wise. We thought this team maybe was something that they weren't, and maybe Mike Tomlin did get a lot out of this offense. And they're not there. I mean, this isn't Killer B territory, and he had a lot of success with them, regular season success, because he had them. In the postseason, he did not. We've mentioned this a bunch of times. That Jaguars game where they don't have Ryan Shazier and Ben throws some interceptions, they don't get the ball. They don't move it on 4th down. Todd Haley becomes the scapegoat there, ultimately, because they finally had Martavis Bryant, Antonio Brown, Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell. They had them all on the field at the same time. And then the defense lays an egg and gives up, 40-some points. Some of that, because of the short fields, because of the turnovers that they gave to the Jaguars. But they had an offense that also scored 40-some points at that same time. You don't have that anymore. When AB left, Juju to a lesser extent, because Juju... he had some injury problems. He wasn't always like a guy that was going to play a full season, right? And then we found out that maybe he wasn't a wide receiver 1. Maybe it was because he didn't have the other guy that attracted some attention. We were looking for that all off season. Omar Khan was never able to fully pry someone away from another team. And you finally get Mike Williams for whatever reason. Maybe the Jets knew something we didn't when they went and got Devontae Adams and traded Williams away. Maybe they just felt the guy just didn't have it anymore. We always talk about that age. He's right there at age 31, 32, where these guys drop off. Calvin Austin, is he a guy that could jump in? We never had Roman Wilson, who they drafted. So the areas that you're looking at with some of the skill players, I think it might still be some of the same issues that they'll need to look at as they head into the offseason. They got to find somebody alongside George Pickens. And I say that alongside George Pickens because I think there's a lot of nonsense out there about trading George Pickens. When you need a wide receiver 2 and you're saying that you need this wide receiver threat, and you need it to replace Antonio Brown, you need to do all of these different things, right? Are you getting rid of the best guy that you have on that side of the field? Like, are you getting rid of the best receiver you have? I don't think he's easily replaced.
I'm going to go on the opposite contention of you on this. I think it's realistically reasonable to shop George Pickens because of the immaturity issues, because it's the last year of his rookie contract, because he may not be the guy you want long-term, right? And they can find receivers. They've proven one of the things they're good at is finding receivers, right? I'm not saying they must trade George Pickens. I'm saying if somebody's going to offer them capital that is worthwhile and is going to help them improve the team, he is absolutely not off limits. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, that was my next question was I don't think they're getting pick 32 overall from another team like they did with Chase Claypool if they were to move George Pickens.
Really, really dumb.
I mean, we've seen the Bears. The Bears are sniffing for a coach. Somebody's talking about all these things. I had a little shorter reel out there about the Colin Coward thing. Trade Pickens, trade TJ Watt. Of course, get rid of your best player on both sides of the football, and then 2 first-round picks so they can move up and get Shedeur Sanders.
Which I don't want. Why would you want Shedeur Sanders? Give me a break.
No, I don't want him. I don't really think anybody in this draft that's a quarterback is worth moving up and handicapping your future drafts. Now, of course, one of those ones is going to be a swap, so you get rid of next year's. But who's going to do that? That's at the top of this draft right now. Maybe the Titans do go quarterback. I mean, they're not sold on Will Levis and Mason Rudolph as their guys. I wouldn't be necessarily. But
oh hey,
but yeah, I mean, come on, dude. I mean, it's like, but not you as dude, but Colin Coward in saying this in these ridiculous trades. Well, these are the foundational. These are foundational pieces for your team. You saw what happened when the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. They're sitting at pick 2. They're not going to trade with the Steelers and allow them to get a quarterback. They need one themselves. You look at some of the other teams in the top 5, like the New York Giants. They're not going to make that type of trade either. They got rid of Daniel Jones. Or they got Drew Lock. I don't even know that he's actually under contract for another year. Tommy DeVito. Like, they kept their GM. They kept Brian Daboll, their head coach, because they believed something there. They got rid of their best player, Saquon Barkley. Look what he's doing with the Eagles right now. So, like, you get rid of Saquon, and, you know, they do. Look at what the Steelers' record is without TJ Watt. Like, come on. Look what happened when they didn't have George Pickens this year. And now we'll just replace them. They'll put the Superman cape on that is the Steelers jersey, and instantly everything's solved.
We talked about this. If you're going to blow it up, you blow it up, right? If you're going to blow it up and basically say, we anticipate next year we'll be lucky to win 2 games or 1 or maybe none. If you're going to blow it up, see what I don't think you get a first-round pick even for TJ Watt. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think you do, right? Because he's getting older. You're not getting a first-round pick for George Pickens in a million years. You're just not, unless somebody can really be hoodwinked by Omar Khan. So you're not going to get 2 more first-round picks, even lower-end first-round picks, maybe for TJ. But remember, he's got a big price tag that's going to come along with him, and he's getting older. Right? His production fell off at the end of the year, whether that's always because of injury or not. The point being, if you're going to blow it up, fine, blow it up. But they're not going to blow. They have a core that they think they can build around, so they're not going to blow it up. But I don't know that I think George Pickens is part of that core, right? I just don't. I have problems with some of the attitude. I have problems with diva receivers. You already know that. And I'm not convinced that he's the long-term answer, and you're not going to pay him $30 million a year to come in. What happens if he sits out, right? What happens if he's like, I demand an extension, I need more money, blah, blah. There's all kinds of reasons that Pickens could be gone, right?
He will, but he will, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him, and none of those talks are going to happen. The Steelers don't do those kind of talks. Cam Hayward got his extension, and Pat Freiermuth they both got their extensions in September, after training camp and after the preseason, right before week 1 of the regular season. I think part of that was Khan still trying to keep some money on the side. I think he really felt they were
trying to get a receiver.
They were trying to get Ayuk. You know, they were that close. Now, if they had gotten Ayuk, I probably agree, because when you move on from Santonio Holmes, you still have Hines Ward. When you move on from Martavis Bryant, you still have Antonio Brown, and then you go and you could add. Juju Smith-Schuster was already actually a part of that. So it's funny too. I remember seeing that with Bryant and Sammy Coates on Twitter when they were like, "Oh, he's your replacement."
Yeah, he's not my replacement. He's you's replacement.
Yeah, he's your replacement.
But here's the thing. I've been thinking about this, and I think there are four things that need fixed, right? And I'm not going to name these in order, but one we've already talked about is the offensive line. I think there's problems with the defensive line, right? I don't think it's deep enough. I don't think it stops the run well enough. And I don't think it's consistently pressuring the middle enough. They got bullied. They got pushed around too often in the last season. And that's the core. Those 2 things are the core of your team. If you're not built out from there, you're not going to be a contender, okay? So those both things need to be at least patched, or the offensive line needs to be fixed. Whether it can be fixed in a single season is a question mark. But those two things need to be fixed. The receiver room needs to be fixed. There's not enough threat there. You know, whether Pickens stays or Pickens goes, just having George Pickens isn't going to be enough. You don't know what you got with Roman. You don't know. And outside of that, you know, I'm sorry, Calvin Austin has been nice. I think he's a complimentary piece. He's not a true number two. He's not scaring people. Okay. And like, he's a tiny little man. He's a tiny little man that if he gets hit once, he goes down. He's not, people aren't, you know, he's not going to break tackles. And then the elephant in the room, who's, and the most important piece, I will say, who's taking the ball? Like, if you listen to the NFL Drive, the Steelers NFL Drive stuff, you listen to anybody, and not Colin Cowturd, forget him. You know, he's all his commercials where he's like, you always you yell at me even when I'm right. You're never right. I hate you. You suck. Okay, but look, forget him. But the truth of the matter is, the number one position in all of sports, the most important position in all of sports, and especially for sure in football, is the quarterback. Who's taking the snaps? Who's going to be your quarterback? Is it Russ? Is it Justin? Is it neither? Is it one of the two? That has to be how you move forward and figure out what you're going to do. I think, look, we said this when Ben retired, and I'm going to say it again. We need to be ready for some ugly, bumpy seasons until the quarterback position gets ironed out. Who was the guy with the Ravens that won a quarterback that was terrible, not Joe Flacco?
Trent Dilfer, I believe, won with the Ravens. They were close with Elvis Gerback, too, I want to say.
That ain't happening
That might have happened, too.
Just flat out doesn't happen anymore. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with a Trent Dilfer-level quarterback. You need a guy. And they do, right now, I don't believe they have a guy. I don't think Russ is a guy anymore. I'm not sure Justin is ever going to be a guy. He certainly isn't a guy at the moment. You don't have that guy. You might stick with Justin Fields and just say, let's see what happens. You might stick with Russ and let's see what happens. But I you know, that's where they have to start to think about things. Who's taking the snaps? Who's going to run this offense? Who's going to fit into whoever the coordinator is? If it's Arthur Smith, and I know we've heard all the noise about Russ and Arthur Smith didn't get along. He really preferred Justin Fields. They made it work, blah, blah, blah. We've heard all that. I don't know what's true,
I didn't hear any of that. I think
it's a ton of it going on.
I think some of that is, I'm sorry. I saw something else just the other day too, and it wasn't the most reputable platform or outlet that was putting it out there. There's all these things. Justin Fields wants to come back. Russ wants to come back. Russ don't want to come back. Justin Fields don't want to go. It's all speculative. I have a very hard time believing so much of that, dude. I really do.
I don't believe anything I hear, right? That's what I'm saying. You hear a lot of stuff. I don't believe any of it. What I know is the offensive line needs to be fixed. The defensive line needs to be shorn up and maybe fixed. They need another corner, and they absolutely need to fix the wide receiver room. They got to deal with, I mean, the hits just keep on coming.
There's quite a bit there.
They have one running back under contract, you know, essentially for next year, and he's a restricted free agent.
Yeah.
Right? They have to figure out the running back. They don't know what they have yet. There's a lot of work that needs to be done going for this team next year. And I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to say this right now. Second round or first round pick, Ibuka. Second round pick. Second round pick. I don't know. Don't care. Figure something else out. Third round pick, Travion Henderson. Fourth round pick, Will Howard. There you go.
You know, it's kind of funny. I think Brian Batko of a PG was saying that. He goes, look for the Steelers to look at Ohio State. It's like, you mean like how the Eagles looked at Georgia or whoever the national champions were? The Steelers also dipped their toe in the that team up north territory, you know. We don't talk about them. They may or may not still have a trophy in the case from last season. I don't know. You know, that team that other Harbaugh coached before he Taylor into the NFL. No, I'm not talking about them, but that's where Roman Wilson came from. Some other guys came from, but you're not wrong. And I probably would look at, all those Ohio State guys seemed fine. I think Ibuka will be about like at the top of this list, though. He's a pretty complete player. I don't know if you get him at 21 necessarily, but would I take the stab?
I think you can.
I think
really
you
think
can.
you can.
These wide receiver groups and classes in the draft are usually pretty deep. The free agency one is not so deep, though. And when you look at it, it's basically T. Higgins if he becomes available. And then you've got a bunch of older receivers that were once highly paid guys. You have Stephon Diggs. You have Keenan Allen. You have Amari Cooper. Chris Godwin, who isn't always the shining paradigm of health either. Deontay Johnson, who I don't know who will probably sign that dude. DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods. All these guys are well north of 30. Even Demarcus Robinson's 31 from the Rams, who kind of broke out a little bit. There's no guarantee as to some of the.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How old's DK?
DK's approaching. He was like 28, 29 this season.
That's what I was thinking. He's getting close. If you want a stopgap, maybe you still go after him. And you can make a deal with Seattle, maybe not. But I mean I don't think there's an answer in free agency based on. I looked at that same list that you're talking about. I don't think there's an answer in free agency. I don't think there's a receiver in free agency that's going to be worth the money you have to spend on them in free agency. If they're going to get a receiver who is a known quantity outside of the draft, they're going to have to make a trade, and that becomes a lot more difficult.
That's why I think Pickens is back, regardless of what people think about. Like, people get mad at Juju dancing and playing Fortnite. So, I really don't want to hear it sometimes. Pickens actually won, some sportsmanship type deal from the NFL or one of these, writing groups or whatever for his playoff game, for the playoff game against the Ravens. Yeah, you want to talk about random things you see. You have to see it to believe it. And,
yeah. You know what I got to say about that?
He didn't get fined.
This is what I'm going to say. Crack is whack, yo.
Yeah, it almost needed your sarcasm sign, but it wasn't sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely, you're in the same position as you were last season. You probably weren't thinking as much defense. You were still thinking, corner, still fix offensive line, eye on defensive line toward the future. But that wide receiver room, and you were looking at quarterback, and quarterback's going to dictate the pace for so many things because they have about $40 million projected available before they actually set the cap, which we won't know and it wasn't even until a week before free agency hit last year that they actually announced it. They may do some restructures and whatnot. Your top 3 highest paid players, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Cameron Hayward, and then top 5, Alex Highsmith and Patrick Queen, is all guys that are on the defensive side of the ball. Then you have Preston Smith, who he's not going to be back. I wouldn't imagine. No. That was just, they were trying to get this roster prepared to make a run, and you're making a run with Russell Wilson and his, cheap quarterback contract that you won't have anymore either. But people thinking that Justin Fields will just be cheap. Sometimes you get what you pay for with either one of these guys, but it's got to be one of them. And I've been pretty adamant in saying that I feel Fields' ceiling is a backup. You could talk all you want about mobility. The guy runs after he doesn't make any reads. Some of that is the offensive line, and that also applies to Russell Wilson. We talked about last offseason, but both of these guys the previous year were they held onto the ball longer than anybody before. They weren't making these quick throws. They weren't finding open receivers. If those receivers even get open, the identity wasn't there to run the football. Sometimes you couldn't just get that 1 yard. So a lot of that with the quarterback also depends on the offensive line. It's just that I don't expect much more than the production you got out of Trubisky or got out of Kenny Pickett, having Justin Fields there, except for, okay, he's going to break a 25-yard run when everything else breaks down and he goes to his feet. It's all the same criticisms and critiques I had that I didn't like about Joshua Dobbs, except Fields is a higher pedigree player coming out of college. He obviously has a hell of a lot more starts, and I do think of him a little bit more, but he's still, ball security is still an issue with him at times. And, where were your stars? When did George Pickens finally score a receiving touchdown? Najee Harris get a rushing touchdown? These guys, Pat Freiermuth, they were largely absent when Justin Fields was the starter. Russ comes in. When Russ had that nice streak, 6-7 starts, offense is gaining 100+ more yards. They're scoring 10+ more points per game. Yeah, they were beating up the Giants, or the Jets were supposed to be a contender and they fell apart, but they also had a win over the Commanders. And we just talked about the Commanders. Look where they're at right now, and Dan Quinn and his offense. And then it started to fall apart. So you look at the teams that are in these conference championships. They have a Josh Allen. You have a Patrick Mahomes. But Patrick Mahomes, they're winning with defense. Spagnola's got some guys on the defensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn, they made some savvy signings. They talked about that. They bring Bobby Wagner in there. They make that trade for Lattimore. You've got some guys on the other side of the football too with the Eagles where they make very savvy all those Georgia guys they bring in on the defense and the rotations they have. Jalen Carter blew up this past weekend. You watched it just live and in real time, just harassing the quarterbacks. So you can't necessarily just turn a blind eye to, I think it's those trenches. You got to bring one of the two guys back, I think, and maybe make a stab for whatever quarterback might be available. It's not going to be a first rounder. It's not going to be a surefire. This guy's going to start. It's probably going to be development, and you're rolling with whoever it is, whether it's Wilson or Fields for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, to take a step back, look at the position groups. Let's just start with the Eagles. Eagles versus the Steelers. Do the Steelers beat them in any single position group? Maybe outside linebackers. Maybe linebacking. But I'm not even sure 100% across linebacking. They certainly don't win on the defensive line. They certainly don't win on the offensive line. Right? Obviously, they're not winning a running back. They're not winning a quarterback. Maybe you can make some caveats in some of the defensive backfield, but not. That's about it. They're not winning the receiver room, right? That's the problem. They have so many flaws right now and so many needs to try and build a roster that is capable of being a championship roster. That I can understand the feeling of, we got to start over again. I don't think we have to start over again, but I understand that feeling from some people and some fans who might say, blow it up, right? And I just don't agree. I think you can find ways to get better. I think Omar Khan can do some things, but I do think you're going to see some surprising moves. I don't know what they are. That little headlight doesn't actually give me the ability to see into the future. I don't know what they
Say
are.
it ain't so.
It's not. It's unfortunately not so. But I do believe that there are players on this team that you and I both will go, I don't think there's any chance they're gone, who will be gone come next season and will get moved, because as I said in that article, the thing they need to do is they need to look at every single position, player, coach, and say, are we better with this person or can we get better? And if we can get better, go find a way to get better.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where the patience is. It's definitely thin ice with George Pickens. I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, that guy's locked to be back for sure. I mean, your talent's only going to get you so far before you're shown the door. But you become a problem. You aren't doing the things that you're asked of. I mean, what's next for the Steelers? They have to figure out who the quarterback is. Do you bring one or both of these guys back, and what does it cost you in relativity to what you just said? Which guys stay, which guys go? I know everybody thinks I'm crazy. I don't think this team was half bad with Russell Wilson. I think a lot of the problems are the same thing that Russ had problems with. It is at the end of his tenure with Seattle. He wasn't protected at all. Dude was getting sacked a ton. Whereas Fields still takes a lot of sacks too for being such a he's more of a, at this stage of their careers, Russ isn't as athletic as he once was, right? He's not running away from people like Fields will. There's no denying that. But I also don't believe that Fields is just going to run around and become Lamar Jackson. And part of what Todd Monken did with Jackson, he got his ass to stay in the pocket. He's still not the best pocket passer, but when he extends plays or he's able to run, who's going to catch him? He's a top tier athlete. He's one of a kind, really one of a kind. You're not going to find two of a kind there with Fields, I think. But if you have to
look at him like Lamar, you look at him and watch some of the plays that he makes.
Or Allen, throw him in there too.
Yeah, well, even Josh, it's different. Josh is power. Lamar is grace, right? Like he feels like he's moving like Neo sometimes, right? You can't imagine how he just does this weird little sidestep and all of a sudden whoever it was is just faked out of their complete shoes, right? And he gets away. His elusivity, if that's even a word,
we'll make it one,
is absurd, right? Josh just beats you up, right? Josh just goes, you're not, that's why I liked Josh Allen and wanted them to draft Josh Allen back in the day, was because he reminds me of Ben when Ben was young, right? But more athletic and more with a better running ability than Ben had. But he just powers people, right? So, I mean, they're different, but at the same time, you do sit there and go, how's he doing that, right? they just don't have that guy. And no, Justin Fields is not that guy. I mean, trying to say Justin Fields because he's a mobile quarterback is going to be like Lamar. No, that's like saying I'm going to be like, Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, Fields, he gets those running yards, but again, how much of it's by design? Jackson gets a lot of his by design, or has in the past. A lot of those were designed runs. I mean, you look at the college football national championship last night, Will Howard on designed runs. Those are design runs. A lot of them with Fields. When they brought him in later, sure. You want to know why the Steelers were winning those games with Fields at quarterback? It wasn't Fields at quarterback. It was the defense. And the defense did a lot. And then Wilson also helped complement. I think if they were able to move the ball a little bit more and use your playmakers, such as Freiermuth, such as Pickens, such as Najee Harris, when Fields was in there, you probably don't lose to the Colts and or the Cowboys. You probably have a better record. You probably have a home playoff game. Maybe it's all a different story. Maybe the Ravens crumble under the pressure of playing at Acrisure Stadium. That's why I don't have a problem. People think I'm crazy. I don't have a problem. I'm still cautiously optimistic. I know where the floor is with Russell Wilson. He's still not going to go out there like a Joe Burrow and throw for 3, 4, 5 touchdowns in a game. He also doesn't have the personnel to do that type of thing. He's really not that guy that's going to throw for 300 and 400 yards, but he is a guy that used to be in the league MVP type of conversations. I don't think there's a lot of suitors out there for either one of these quarterbacks. That's why the possibility of them returning. We mentioned the teams at the top of the draft. The Raiders, I think, are sitting there at 6 too. They need to do something. Would they maybe go for a Fields or go for a Russell Wilson? I mean, they've got a whole regime change there again too. So, but just to put a kind of a bow on this for the Steelers, they do need to figure out they need to figure out their quarterback sooner than later. I think it's at least one of these two guys, or you run it back with both if you don't feel that you could get somebody in the draft. Mike Tomlin was quoted as saying Jalen Hurts wasn't a first-round draft pick. Lamar got pick 32. It's not impossible to find somebody in the top 50 and not be in the top 10 when you get them. But the gamble is
historic draft classes, though.
Yeah, there's some of that.
Historically packed with quarterbacks.
Lamar was the fifth quarterback taken. Exactly.
And just look at the other quarterbacks that were taken as well. It was a packed draft class. Very rarely is it something that is that historically strong at that position. And next year this year, 2025 ain't it. 2026 in Pittsburgh, right? Aren't we hosting the draft in 2026?
It's set up storybook style, isn't it? Then they get their first round quarterback, and that's the Cinderella story right there.
That's So there is part of a storyline here that says blow it the hell up, because what would be better than having the draft in Pittsburgh and having the Steelers have the number 1 pick?
Well,
I know they're not going to do that.
No, because they got Cam Hayward, you got TJ Watt, you still got Minka Fitzpatrick, you got Mike Tomlin under contract. You still feel that you could win with these guys. They are among the best, if not the best, or elites players at their position, but you're not getting the amount of sacks that the Steelers got over the last few seasons. They're not in the same category as when Keith Butler just cut these guys loose, and they were how many seasons in a row that they have where they were the top team with the most sacks. It's not happening. The pressure's not getting there the same way. That's why I think you got to strongly look at the defensive coordinator, maybe some of the other defensive assistant coaches too. We didn't really talk about, but Carl Dunbar, I think I'd keep there. Keanu Benton, he's coming around. I think he's a guy. Does Larry Ogunjobi make you better? We're going to talk about who stays and who goes. That's going to be our next topic probably on the next show.
Should I stay or should I go? We need to steal the Clash song. Like how much of a clip can we play of a song before we get in trouble? Like 30 seconds?
No. I don't even think you can get 30 seconds, man. It's like, there's nothing there. It's immediate. I mean, there's can
I just go da-na-na-na-na-na-na?
Nope, that's immediately a lawsuit and a C&D.
We're already in trouble. Oh, man.
If you use that in your own song, there's certain, melodies or certain, I'm not the big music I was never a band or anybody kind of guy, but I know enough that if you sample enough of like a little bit of a song, just go look at Ray Parker, the Ghostbusters theme versus Huey Louie in the News. I Want a New Drug. There's ones like that where it's just like those lawsuits, all those lawsuits. Well, it's just, and it's not the only example. It's far from the only example.
Well, it's different now. Now today, people just say, "Oh yeah, I'm sampling that song," and as long as you get credit, it's okay.
There's still royalties.
By the way, I was sampling the Clash when I did that, no. So it's the Clash's song. It's not mine.
Oh, that wasn't Jaws or Super Mario theme.
No.
Or see, those are very close, but you just make one. Anyways, that's enough from that for me, folks. We're looking at various personnel and talent acquisitions, who stays, who goes in the next show. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe and follow us. And we'll be coming around once or twice a week as we have things to talk about. Try and maybe make these shows a little shorter and then come back to you sooner when there might be some other news, but there's really not. We're just going to look forward to the conference championships. 7 straight for the Kansas City Chiefs, man. It really tells you what happens when you get the right coach and the right quarterback. Took Andy Reid forever. Labeled as a choke artist, not labeled that anymore, man. 7 straight conference championships. And I have a dear friend that was a Kansas City Chiefs fan. And I told that friend the other day, it's got to feel good because you didn't have a home playoff game since the Steelers had played there in 93 or 94 when they had Joe Montana, and they were trying to do the same things. They used to pick up all the San Francisco quarterbacks. They had Steve Bono, they had Elvis Gerback, they had all these guys that got casted aside from San Francisco when they had, their starters or whatever in place. But even San Francisco, a little long in the tooth there. I think Kyle Shanahan, a lot of theirs is injuries, obviously. So we're not going to make all of those same comparisons. Yeah, I'm pulling for the Bills. I feel bad for the Lions. It's probably. I'd be shocked if it wasn't the Eagles. And Eagles get to host an AFC Championship game. They probably weren't looking at that when they saw Minnesota with 14 wins and the Lions with 13, 14 wins. Those teams are out.
You're never going to hear me do the fly Eagles fly.
No, you're not going to hear me. You're not going to see me do the let's go Buffalo thing either. That just makes me.
I'm just going to say go
nauseated.
Bills.
Yeah, just go Bills.
That's my horse in the race now is the Bills.
That's fine, and I'm cool with that. So, folks. If you haven't already, leave us a rating review wherever you may be watching or listening. Let us know some feedback on the new format, some topics you might want us to dig into, and of course, we're gonna look at some bad takes too here in the near future because there's a lot of them floating around. It seems like every day there's one in particular. There's a channel that I see that's out there, and they will say get rid of George Pickens or George Pickens will be back and extend George Pickens. They have 5 different things you could do with George Pickens in 5 different videos. It's like, well, which one do you think you would do? And it's okay to, uncover all the bases, but holy cow, it comes off as clickbait for sure. So
I only have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
OH.
Yeah, we're happy campers on that. Were you a little bit nervous though? Just a little bit nervous towards the end?
Was I a little bit nervous? I wasn't ever really nervous. Because I felt like even worst case, it's a tie. It never was a position where they're going to go down and win the game at the end of the game. And they had to get the 2-point conversion. And how they're going to get 3 2-point conversions. I wasn't really nervous.
Yeah.
It was annoying.
Yeah. But I mean, for a lot of people, I'd be curious to see what the ratings were. I think people that aren't invested in either Notre Dame or Ohio State probably tuned out early in the third quarter because it was, you get into the fourth quarter and then it got a little close. And then Jeremiah Smith, man, when you talk about on third down and just Chip Kelly in that offense, man, he went back to just being an offensive coordinator. Maybe the Steelers could find a guy like that. Maybe they could find a guy like that with the defensive coordinator.
That's it. Tank for 4.
Tank for 4. There's a few names that I like that's out there. We'll talk about those in the near future. Robert Saleh. If he doesn't get a head coaching sniff, by all means. There are people talking about Mike McCarthy. I said, they're talking about him replacing Tomlin. And it's like, are you nuts? We've got stability in different ways. So, and I already mentioned it. But that'll do it for us today, folks. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. As we always close out these shows, again, like, comment, or subscribe. Check out Bye Week at the Beach. That code's Bye Week, byeweekatthebeach.com. That's coming up just in about a week and a half here. So you want to get out of the cold weather, go check that out too. Till next time, we encourage all of you out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.